Well, I think the problem with people that try to understand Israel and Palestine is that they try to understand it from 1972 or from 2005 or 89 or 67. And the problem is that we have to go way back to the beginning, to the Balfour Declaration, to the creation of Zionism within Europe at that time, where we have to face the facts that anti-Semitism was a rampant thing in Europe. And it also exposes a veritable truth about that scenario, something that a lot of my elder Jewish friends explained to me, and they were very poignant in saying so, that the natural enemy of the Jewish people has never been Middle Eastern people, has never been other Semites. It's always traditionally been, for 2,000 years, insane, imperialistic people from Europe that have consistently genocided, taken advantage, thrown out, persecuted, you know, and that's something that happened through all the Middle Ages, whether we're talking about Germany, France, Spain, and all of their charters, from the Alhambra Decree to the Code Noir. I think that it's important for us to examine these things, because then we start to talk about Britain's role in it, and the Balfour Declaration, and the... Just pause for a second. You can't... Not one word. I can't. So I think we have to talk about the Balfour Declaration. We have to talk about a series of other things that took place before we can even discuss what's happening now in Palestine. But obviously, it's not a war. You know, it's a massacre. If I stand behind you and I smash you in the head with a bat, we didn't have a fight, my brother. You know what I mean? I assaulted you. I attacked you. And I think that there's severe underreporting about the proportionality of what happens. So, I mean, I think that obviously there's a media bias in the UK and there's a media bias in America over the issue. And I'm sorry that we don't have a more open discussion about it. And I think the problem is because when a lot of people start talking about this, they're accused of anti-Semitism. And I'm going to say something very honest, that you know what the problem of accusing every single person of who has differences with the foreign and the domestic policy of Israel of anti-Semitism, the problem with that is that there are anti-Semites out there. There are people who are Holocaust deniers. There are people who are rampantly racist. And if you tell every single person who questions your politics that you're in the same boat with those people, then how do you know your enemies from the people who simply want to get somewhere better in the world? You know, and I think that's unfortunately what's going on right now. I think it's also sad to see that the left is in a complete disarray in the Middle East and in Israel. You know what I mean? So you have right-wing policies and draconian laws that are run rampant to the point where people are talking about genociding Palestinian people. And when we talk about genocide, we don't have to go far back into history to see that being done to the people who are in Israel now, and that's a shame. And I think that without that sort of historical context, where do we go as a people? Where do we go as a human race? You know, because that's a very big issue, not just for them, but it's going to be in the future when people look back at the world and say, how could everyone have simply let this happen? How could people have just been quiet when other human beings were being murdered? And you had these quasi-intellectual excuses that never really add up when you actually put them to the test. So I would just say that before we start talking about what's happening in Gaza and that massacre that's going on now, I advise everybody to look up the history of how it was created. Britain had no more right to give that land to them than I have the right to give away, you know, Essex to Mongolia. You know what I mean? I think that it's just sad that there's no historical perspective to that.
Talking about yourself and being in the UK, you're in the UK quite often.
Right.
Explain to me what you see as the type of energy and the type of love you get when you're in the UK, when you walk in the streets. Because you did a big show in Brixton about a year and so ago. So tell me how you feel about the UK.
Well, I mean, I've come here before just to work on music, to work with producers, to connect with DJs. I've been here when I didn't even have a show. You know, I just came out here. I think the first time was in 2002, 2003. And basically, I was staying with a friend of mine, Ralph Dog, shout out to him, and we were staying out in like Zone 4. We took like a train and 2 buses to get home and all that. But I gotta say that when I first came here, I had just a voracious appetite for bars and for being on radio or whatever I could do, any underground stuff. And I remember my friend put me on the phone with DJ 279, shout out to him, and he was like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm Immortal Technique. I'm from Harlem. I'll come up there and, you know what I mean, I'll destroy the microphone, and if you don't, like, you could throw me out a window. I'm not playing. And I went up there and I just started rapping, and he was like, yo, I love what you do. Like, you infuse the streets with what goes on in the world. So being that I got a good impression from this place from the gate, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, sure, people are going to hate, but that doesn't matter. Like, I got love from the street here. I got love from people that just heard me rhyme, who I was just walking around the street ciphering with. So I got a really genuine introduction to this place. Besides, I always felt like London always has this attitude that New York had, like in the late 80s, early 90s, where people aren't afraid to boo. You know what I mean? Like, in New York, people are afraid to boo. Even if they don't like you now, they'll be like, oh yeah, he rhyming, you know. But in London, I've seen people get on stage and like, oh, for fuck's sake, get him off stage. He's terrible. You toss part. People throwing shit. They don't care. And I love that, because you're being honest. You're being genuine. You know what I mean? And I just appreciate that. I've always gotten that from the fan base here. I mean, and then it was interesting because I wrote a lot in my bars about so many different cultures, and it just dawned on me that New York is not the only place that has a gigantically diverse population. You know, my range of rhymes goes from Kurdistan to Punjab to Somalia to Ethiopia to Japan to the Philippines, all around the world, to Palestine, to Brazil, to Peru. I mean, I could go on, Jamaica, Cuba, and I just feel like I can connect with people because I want to understand their struggle so I can understand my better. You know, I think that's very important. If you can identify with somebody, and even if you don't agree with them politically, but you can acknowledge their sacrifice and their pain and their suffering, that brings you to a commonality in a level. Like, maybe I don't agree with you about everything, but I acknowledge the fact that your people have suffered. I acknowledge that you've had to pay the ultimate price for your freedom. That means something to you, even though you don't agree with me, and now we can have a civilized conversation. So, you know, I don't care what faction you're from, you know, and I never was prejudiced against somebody because of their religion or because of their race. It never made sense to me. You know, if you cool, you cool. If you whack, you whack. You know what I mean? If you down with me, you down with me. I'd rather hang out with a good Jewish person than a bad Muslim person. You know what I mean? With a good Muslim person than a bad Christian person. You know what I mean? With a good atheist than a bad of any religion. So it's like I value the content of a person's character. That's something that my father instilled in me when I was a very young child. He was like, you know, sometimes the people that look like you and pray to the same God that you do will be the people that stab you in the back. Don't automatically trust people just because they claim to be about what you're about. They have to prove that. You know, your respect and your trust is something people have to earn constantly. It's not just some one-time thing and then you give it away forever. It doesn't work that way. You know, that's a fool's logic.
So the middle passage.
Oh, the middle passage. I hear of nothing more, man. You know, I was working on this DVD called The Revolution of Immortal Technique. Then recently we started producing. I did CF's new record with Southpaw, The Ascension, and Hassan Salam is in the picture now. So we're doing Life in Black and White, and these are 2 records that are obviously going to come out this year. And then we're looking at releasing the middle passage late in the year or early next year. I mean, I'm about halfway done with it. And it's an interesting project because there are so many songs that were added and then removed. Like, I took originally The Rich Man's World from The Martyr was supposed to be on the middle passage, but you got to understand, I can't clear no ABBA sample. You know what I mean? The middle passage has a duality. Yes, it's the transfer from freedom to slavery for African people that built the United States, that built England as a whole. I mean, one of my sisters, shout out to my sister, one of my sister's favorite movies, because she likes, ye old English shit. She likes this movie called Elizabeth, right? Where Kate Blanchett plays the Queen Elizabeth. And it's funny because at the end of the movie, we both laugh because it's like, oh, her reign ushers in a golden age. Her reign ushered in a transatlantic slave trade. That was Britain's golden age, dude. You made your money selling people. You don't have anything to be proud of because of that. You have something to be proud of when you stand up for principles, when you stand up for human rights, when you stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves. Your golden age built off the back of other people's children in bondage is not a source of pride. So I think that for me, the Middle Passage has that sense, and it's also a way of opening a conversation about, well, what's religion's involvement as well? The first ship to leave Africa bound for England with slaves was called what? The Good Ship Jesus. Like, what sense does that make? You're preaching religion and Christ in one hand and bondage and servitude in the other? You're a fraud. And that's why things fail. Because your country's schizophrenic, not because of liberalism or conservatism, because the people whose moral character should be called into question at that age isn't, because they're related to somebody who makes the news now. I mean, I don't know of any other ridiculous way other than to say that, but the duality of the Middle Passage is that when I was in the underground, I was free. I'll do anything I want to. I'll put anyone on the record. I don't have to ask permission. I don't have to clear samples. I don't have to do nothing. I put a freestyle and I just throw it out. But now I have to work into the parameters of the game, which is, a little bit more difficult. So I would just say that for me, the Middle Passage is a very personal record as well. It's not just facts and history. It's also something of me, like some hard things. I went through a difficult time wondering, are people going to understand what I'm going to tell them? Like, are people going to accept or reject it? And I decided that doesn't fucking matter anymore, that I'm just going to say what I need to say, and I'm going to put all my faults on the table, because sometimes the only time you can tell the truth is when it makes you look bad.
It's interesting you say that. Like, there's a part of you that still wonders whether people will accept or reject what you have to say, but it seems like you have one of the most loyal fan bases there is in music.
Right.
So what would make you feel that they may not accept some of the points?
Well, I mean, it's not a question of accept. It's always going to be truth. It's not a lie. It's just, I don't know if they're ready to see that. I don't know if they're ready to. I mean, of course, my loyal fans will be like, "Oh, fuck that. We're ready. We're ready." You are. You're ready for me to change the perspective about everything that you believe in, everything that you see. You're ready for me to talk about all the stuff that I hold dear to my heart. You're ready for me to tell you about my personal tragedy, and what the good things were that I did and the negative things that I did. I'm going to force you to judge me. Right, there you go.
So you put yourself out there.
I do it, and plus the good thing is that the other thing is that I wrote a lot of story rhymes, so I'm deciding which one people are going to like most and which one they're going to really gravitate to. So it's difficult because everyone always expects an epic story from me, from Dance with the Devil to You Never Know to all the stuff that I did. It's important for them to get and to understand that I'm not sitting here just trying to say things so people will like me. As a matter of fact, a large majority of the population hates sometimes the things that I say. Why? Because it's not in their benefit for that to be out there. They don't make money because of that. But I'm not here for that. I'm here to tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. So of course you're going to offend somebody. You're going to piss niggas off, Real journalism is printing what other people don't want you to print. Everything else is just public relations.
Kind of like getting into where we are about technology and social media. I remember last time you were here, you were talking about the warrior code, and how when men were men. How do you see how people take everything as fact from social media as opposed to like reading how you would?
Well, I mean, that's because you're trying to compartmentalize a book worth of knowledge into 140 characters, and that really can't be done. And that's only because society has a very it has a low powers of retention in the media. Like everything's a snap second. You see videos. There's not a shot that's more than 8 seconds there. You know what I mean? It has to switch. It has to change. people have almost become socially autistic in the sense that they don't interact with people as much as they define them for everything else. I'll give you an example, right? Starving people. People who are starving. Imagine if nobody here had ate for the past week. We've been drinking our own urine. Our skin is starting to get fucked up. Our ribs are showing. We're hungry. We're starving. And there's 20,000 of us, right? We're starving to death. And what are we going to do? We're going to look for food wherever we can find it. It doesn't matter if you are the richest person in England from the oldest blue blood fucking family that are related to Alfred the fucking Great. I don't care. If you're starving for 2 weeks, all of your manners are out the door. All of this society that you created is finished. So imagine 20,000 of us running around looking for food. Skinny, skin peeling off. What do we look like? What do we look like? I'm just saying, what in terms of movies, like end of the world movies, 20,000 people, skinny as hell, skin peeling off. What do we look like? Somebody say it.
Zombies.
There you go. Do you talk to zombies? Do you rationalize with them? Do you try and ask them why they're that way? No. What do you do with zombies? You shoot them in the fucking head before they come near you. They're just training us to be that way with people. So for me, I have to find a way to say, hey, what made the zombie into a zombie? What made the terrorist into a terrorist? Isn't terrorism the wrong answer to the right question? The wrong answer is to bomb innocent civilians and kill people for nothing, right? The right question, though, is why are we living in this misery, in this hellhole? Why is it that I'm here in the Congo and this is a richer country than Britain 20 times over in terms of natural resources, but poorer in every aspect? And why is it that it's in every single westernized imperialistic society's benefit to have incompetent leaders exist in the Middle East and Africa and in Latin America? As a matter of fact, they've sold it so well to the people that the people of the Middle East only think that they can have the most concentrated form of oligarchy, which is monarchy, or a fundamentalist government that's a theocracy. Is that the only thing you have to choose from? So you can either marry your daughter to a guy that's going to beat her for the rest of her life or rape her for the rest of her life. Is that what you're telling me? That's the options you think you have? Guess who's a fucking slave? Guess who's been programmed? Now I'm going to pull the plug on you and you're not going to like me for it. And that's fine. But at least in the future people will say, well, goddamn, at least somebody stood up for them. At least somebody said what the hell was going on in Gaza, or what happened in Punjab, or what happened to the indigenous people in the Americas. At least somebody will say that. At least somebody will point out what happened in Rwanda. At least somebody will say, hey, in music, as opposed to in media that gets swept under the table for major media to step over. So that's just what I'm here to do. And if I'm not recognized until after I die, then I don't give a fuck. I'm having a great time with my friends on a state terrorism tour. My brother Hassan Salam has Life in Black and White coming out. He's an incredibly powerful artist that paints a visual portrait of music, and he has a lot of concepts and strong. And then my brother CF got the album Ascension. Again, a lot of conceptuality, lyrically saturated, and the man's a monster on the microphone. My brother Southpaw is continuously producing. DJ Static is out here spinning for me, a world famous DJ. So, I mean, we're just here to do our part in the struggle. And we're not mic hogs, we're not stage hogs. We're not trying to say we're better than anybody else, or we're not shitting on no one to make ourselves feel better or aggrandize our position in the game. We're just saying what needs to be said. You know what I mean? Because my father told me that only a coward fights the fights he knows he can win. Bravery comes from fighting the fights that need to be fought. You know what I mean? It takes nothing to punch some drunk guy outside a club that's not even looking at you and knock him out. You feel like a real tough guy now. But you got to square up against someone that's bigger, stronger, faster than you when you know the chips are down. But you're doing it because you want to protect your family. You're doing it because you want to protect your woman, your children. You know, you're doing it because you want to tell people about what's really going on. Those are the fights you need fighting. And again, state terrorism. What's the most common form of terrorism? It's not a kid throwing a rock. It's not children showing up at a border in Texas looking for shelter away from child rapists trying to sell them into sexual slavery, or gangs trying to recruit them. No, that's not terrorism. The most common form form of terrorism is that which comes from a government or a state that's perpetrated against another people or that's perpetrated against its own people. Immortal technique, state terrorism. You know what it is, baby. Terrorism. You know what it is, baby. Terrorism. You know what it is, baby.